ladies and gentlemen, we move to our next
you
session.
make a fantastic organization.
Our next session, and for the next session, I will hand over this, the floor to Mrs. Shelley Brunswick. She is also, as we mentioned already, that she is our co-organizer. She will manage the next session. So please welcome Mrs. Shelley Brunswick.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sharif. And again, it's such an honor to join everyone today. I have the privilege of moderating session 2, which is space commerce and career opportunities in the space industry for young graduates. And we have a stellar panelist today. So I'm going to start with Lieutenant General Retired Harry Radigi. General Retired Radigi is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Cybersecurity Center, a national level nonprofit organization that provides collaborative cybersecurity knowledge and services to the United States. The National Cybersecurity Center was founded in 2016 with the goals of developing the cybersecurity workforce, collaborating with the private sector, military and federal agencies, and supporting the educating the public sector to better protect our cities and country and national assets. General Radigi also is the senior counselor for the Cohen Group, a strategic advisory firm led by the former U.S. Senator and Secretary of Defense, William Cohen. He is a former director of the Defense Information Systems Agency and manager of the National Communication Systems. So I'd like to welcome General Radigi. And one of the topics we did talk about in some of the earlier panel discussions and from some of our esteemed panelists was about cybersecurity and how cybersecurity is so integrated with space technology so that many times they're seen to be two separate entities, but in reality, they're intersected and riding together on the same critical infrastructure. So it's my esteemed privilege to welcome to the floor General Radigi.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Brunswick, and it's a real pleasure to be here with everyone today. I brought some charts with me to support my presentation, and I hope that you can all see those now. Well, my topic today is the need for cybersecurity in space. And in the past, there have been a belief that objects launched into space were relatively safe from attack. However, today, there is a growing realization that any object on the land, on the sea, in the air, in space, and in cyberspace is vulnerable to cyber attacks. Thus, today, we at the US-based National Cybersecurity Center are addressing the need for cybersecurity in space. Naturally, protecting space systems today and tomorrow offers great opportunities across the international community for innovation, space commerce, and career development, especially for young graduates. And these numerous international opportunities are not constrained by regional boundaries, but welcome innovative thought across the global community for addressing the need for cybersecurity in space. Within the National Cybersecurity Center, we host a relatively new organization called the Space Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or Space ISAC. The mission of the Space ISAC is stated on this slide. Briefly, the Space ISAC facilitates collaboration across the global space industry in order to enhance our ability to prepare and respond to vulnerabilities, incidents, and threats, and to share information among Space ISAC members. Now, these are the three very important core values of the Space ISAC. First, to share critical cyber intelligence and build awareness for all of our members. Second, to offer multiple ways for our members to strengthen space mission performance, despite the potential of enduring a cyber attack. Third, to build trust across the Space ISAC by providing workshops, summits, meetings, webinars, and working groups. Overall, the Space ISAC is a global network of analysts, executives, and practitioners from both the private and public sectors to share critical information and best practices. Now, this chart shows the current Space ISAC communities. And you can see on the left that we have members from numerous communities, including the launch community, communications, space vehicles, space systems engineering, cloud and data processing, and the area that I'm emphasizing today, especially cybersecurity. And on the right side of this chart, we show the numerous partner agencies that are members of the Space ISAC, including the United States Space Force, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, and many other critical activities. In the center of this chart, we show ourselves at the National Cybersecurity Center. And this allows for the Space ISAC to perform its mission of providing critical information sharing and analysis capabilities. And of significance, you can also see that the Space ISAC already has international partner agencies, and some of those are listed across the bottom, including the European Space Agency, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and DLR, or the German Aerospace Center. Now, this is my last chart today, and it displays the contact information for the National Cybersecurity Center and the Space ISAC. And I'll just conclude my brief message today by asking you to reach out to us in order to begin a dialogue on how you can join in and benefit from the important services and support that is provided. Thank you very much. Ms. Brunswick.
Well, thank you, General Radegui. That was really insightful. And again, highlighting the importance of how all this wonderful benefits we have from space technology, and our conference even today is being brought to us courtesy of space technology, and it rides on that cybersecurity infrastructure. So thank you, General Radegui, for those insightful comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, I'm honored to introduce, is Major General Rehan Abdul Baki. He's the Vice Chancellor of the Institute of Space Technology in Pakistan. General Baki holds a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from College of Aeronautical Engineering and a master's degree in helicopter technology from ICESCO, France. During his 38 years of meritorious service in the Pakistani Army, he was associated with various echelons of aerospace and other maintenance outfits. He headed the Army's prestigious Technical Evaluation Branch and later headed the Army's Maintenance Branch. In November 2019, he assumed the appointment of Vice Chancellor, Institute of Space Technology. And he is an avid traveler and actively pursues tennis. Well, General Baki, I Hope that you'll be actively traveling again soon, and hopefully we'll be able to connect and travel when we're all able to meet in person. So it is an honor to meet you, sir. I've enjoyed our discussions, and your topic today is going to be about developing space leaders, an ecosystem of government, academia, and industry. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, honorable participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, good morning and bonjour from Islamabad. It's a bright Thursday afternoon here with temperature now touching a mere 45 degrees Celsius. We feel greatly honored and privileged to be part of this august undertaking and offer our profound gratitude to our gracious host, ICESCO, and their partner, Space Foundation, and congratulate them for this wonderful initiative. I would start my presentation with the briefest possible introduction of the Institute of Space Technology, primarily because it has a direct linkage with what I would recommend at the end of this discourse. Institute of Space Technology Islamabad is one of the premier and only institute in Pakistan in the field of space science, technology, and its applications. It has a heritage of 20 years since its inception in 2002 as a federally chartered degree awarding institute, was one of the 2 leading universities which were audited by the relevant authorities, leading to Pakistan being a signatory of the prestigious Washington Accord, and lately ranked as a research-intensive university according to Higher Education Commission of Pakistan. At present, IST is offering undergraduate and graduate programs leading to PhD in aerospace, avionics, electrical, mechanical, material science and engineering, computer science and engineering, space science, remote sensing and GIS, global navigation, satellite systems, astronomy and astrophysics, physics, and mathematics. May I add, all the engineering and science programs are specifically designed and crafted to produce space technologies experts and leaders. I will also share with you our constant quest to somehow unfold the mystery of how classic education would look like in the next few years, given the availability of a universe of information in the hands of our young students in the shape of the cell phone that they carry, now literally becoming part of their brain and their body. From our own experience, necessitated by the lockdown of COVID-19, it's amazing how the young students adapted themselves to the realities of the online classes. Therefore, a shift from classical imparting of information and knowledge to nurturing innovation, novelty, invention, and leadership is imperative. This could not be more true in the knowledge domain of space sciences. Currently, IST has a strength of 2,200 bright young students in undergraduate and postgraduate programs, with 200 highly specialized and equally motivated faculty. IST also cherishes an asset of 2,100 alumni who are working in national and international organizations. Just like one of the objectives of this symposium, outreach and awareness is a major undertaking at IST. We have the honor of hosting many international conferences regularly and workshops for capacity building and outreach. IST has also been involved in creating space awareness among general masses and especially the school and college students for the last 1 decade by organizing various summer and winter schools along with our trademark and very popular World Space Week. Dealing with space would entail harnessing a host of technologies and applications. The list includes, but not limited to, satellites, their launch systems, ground stations, and other support structure. Hundreds of applications are in use or being contemplated, but are broadly categorized as Earth observation, navigation, communication, and broadcasting. It is our understanding that a triangulated ecosystem for space, comprising of government, academia, and industry, as three vertices of space, commerce, and growth triangle are absolutely essential. Managing anything in or about space requires handling of complex and interdependent cutting-edge technologies involving huge financial outlays. Somehow, work in space is also intrinsically linked with national esteem, pride, and aspirations, and in most cases has vital national security implications as well. It is therefore our humble understanding that governments will need to play a major part in this space ecosystem by offering vision, policy, regulation, and funding, and hence are placed at the vertex of this triangle. On the base, academia and industry play an equally important and vital role. The former entrusted with harnessing technologies and human resource, research, innovation, creativity, and of course, awareness and outreach, and the latter to handle development and commercialization. Generally, it is taken to be true that the current space-going nations follow this broad framework in some shape and form and richly harvest the fruits of their venture in space. And if this model is to be taken to be successful, selling it to the rest of the nations may take some doing. With great humility, I may dare say that this strong recommendation be part of the outcome of this symposium. In a lighter note, and in simple word, it may mean starting the awareness and outreach with none other than the governments of many of our own countries. I quickly may also add that ICESCO is perfectly configured and poised to do exactly the same. More specifically, IST is fully committed and available to play its part as academia under the patronage of ICESCO in any regional and international collaboration, starting from student and faculty exchange programs to setting up of space science department in the universities of participating nations, as shown on the slide on your screens. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I close my discourse by thanking you for your patient hearing. As I said earlier, it has been a great privilege to be part of this august undertaking. Stay blessed, goodbye, and Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, General, for that wonderful presentation. It was exciting. We saw many of the same language that the Space Foundation uses and opportunities to work together to create that future space ecosystem and workforce. So thank you so much. I do want to pause and ask Dr. Sharif if this is an opportunity to take a break, or if he would like us to continue with this panel discussion. I know it's been, we've all been sitting for a very long time.
Thank you. Shelley, we will complete this session. After this, the three talks, after this, the last talk from the European Space Agency, then we'll have a 10 minutes break.
Perfect, thank you. I just wanted to ask, I know everyone in the audience, it's been a wonderful session. So sure. Without any further ado, I'll continue our exciting panel discussion. And our next presenter is Mr. Kevin O'Connell, who is the founder and CEO of Space Economy Rising. Kevin is a recognized expert on space commerce, the global space economy, international intelligence, and U.S. national security matters. For almost 4 decades, he has focused on space commercialization and technology competitiveness and how to advance them in global markets. He has also focused on how these innovations impact U.S. and allied national security. Mr. O'Connell's most recent role was the director of the Office of Space Commerce within the U.S. Department of Commerce. He was the principal architect of outreach to U.S. private space companies to facilitate innovation and encourage increased market growth and visibility. He focused on the growing role of the private space sector and encouraged new space partnerships. With that, I'd like to welcome Mr. O'Connell to the stage, or virtually in this case, and say thank you so much for joining us, and we're all looking forward to your discussion this morning.
Thank you, Shelley, very much for that kind introduction. Excellency Director General, distinguished speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and I'd like to thank ICESCO and the Space Foundation for the invitation to be here. As Shelley mentioned, for the last few years, I have had a unique vantage point in the U.S. government's office that actually advocates for space commercialization. And I've been encouraged this morning to hear a number of comments about the importance of both government-industry relations and the growing role of the private sector in space. As Shelley mentioned before, over 80% of the global space economy has some component that is commercial or private sector in nature. And to the point of this panel, that's absolutely another pathway to encourage young talent to be inspired by the space community and the space industry. Very important. Ladies and gentlemen, the space economy is both accelerating and diversifying, creating new advances in space exploration and in space commerce. Entrepreneurs and innovators today can take advantage of important technical developments from a wide range of scientific activities, but also take advantage of the application of commercial practices and efficiencies to the space business. And I'll just give you one example. For those that have been in the space business for a while, historically, an entrepreneur that had an idea would have to wait a long time to actually even test that idea in space. Today, the near-term, on-demand situation for launch and the miniaturization of satellites allows entrepreneurs to try an idea, modify it if necessary, and bring it to market very, very quickly. It's very important. That means that space capabilities are coming into the market faster and often cheaper than they did in the past. Private sector finance, again, another dimension of the private sector aspects of this, are coming into the market also at a very, very rapid and unprecedented rate. Obviously, some of the capabilities have been highlighted. Broadband communications are going to bring data and services to underserved or unserved parts of the market. Remote sensing in particular, combined with artificial intelligence, will create wholly new insights into both man-made and natural activities on Earth. And then even beyond that, we see the moon moving quickly from a frontier land to a place which will have normal economic activity there. Finally, wholly new market segments in areas like satellite servicing, refueling, repair, restoration of satellites will create a whole new economics of space that should accelerate the trend that I'm talking about. So what are we actually seeing in the market? Let's talk for a minute about the roles of different organizations in the market. On the one hand, governments still play a very important role, whether it be in terms of governance and regulation, participation in international activities related to governance, consistent with the Outer Space Treaty, but also providing at least seed funding or program funding for activities. In the market, we're seeing three clusters of activity underway. First are those that think they can take the current functions that are done commercially, communications, remote sensing, even weather to some extent, and actually do them in a different way because of technology or business models. Secondly, we see a community of people that is trying to invent wholly new capabilities as we explore the moon and other planets. And then finally, a more recent development and a much more down to earth, if you'll allow me to say it that way, cluster of people who are really interested in what I'll call space infrastructure. Those that are going to train, house, and feed the next generation of planetary explorers, but also areas like space medicine and additive manufacturing. Again, some of those have already been mentioned. Now, all of us are inspired by all of the space exploration activities, but increasingly for many countries, this is as much about economic development, the creation of a diverse and highly talented workforce, and the creation of an innovation path in the country, as has been mentioned by so many speakers before. That's a very important dimension of this, the economic aspects of space, for sure. The importance of this cannot be overstated. We have seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, both expected and unexpected aspects where space investments of the past have contributed to improving our livelihood, to improving our health and well-being, and others. For example, the ability to remotely monitor facilities and avoid people needing to gather there, the delivery of supplies to very precise locations. And then, as has been mentioned, telemedicine and distance education are just a few examples of some of the things that we have seen during the pandemic. And many of these will change our lives forever, frankly. All of this leads me to the discussion about talent that this panel is centered on. We are certainly going to need all of the scientific and technical talent that we can get to achieve the aims of the trillion-dollar space economy, and frankly, even beyond that. But I also believe we need to think more broadly than that. We're going to need to inspire our youth, again, as has been mentioned, but we're also going to think about a much wider range of talent, a wider diversity of talent that is going to create wholly new functions in space. So we will need artists, and we will need business case developers, and we will need applications developers and others, in addition to the science and technical talent. So we really need to think very broadly about this talent issue if we're going to hit the trillion-dollar space economy. Let me make a few more comments on this. The first is that we have to increase the general awareness of our knowledge of space. Rarely do people think about the fact when they check the weather or use the navigation application on their phone that they're actually leveraging space. And I think an easy thing for us to do is to just call more general awareness to how space is so important to our lives every single day. Second, we need to inspire the youth, as has been said before, in many different ways, getting them thinking about space and space activities at a much earlier age, whether they be for scientific purposes or for the improvement of life and the creation of services here on Earth. Given my remarks, of course, I would encourage additional thinking about the economic inputs to space activities. What is the state of entrepreneurship? How do we measure talent? How do we think about regulation and the role of private finance? In addition to how we measure the outputs. For many governments, scarce investments in space compete with other necessary investments. And so we need to do a better job of measuring what the social and economic benefits are from space investments. And we started some work on that at Commerce that's underway, and that is an area where I think many, many countries are interested in continuing that work. I would have to call attention to one important thing where there's really important science required, the need to keep space safe and sustainable. Today, space debris actually, as the space environment grows more complex, we're going to need to continue our work to make space as safe and sustainable as possible so that future generations can leverage it as much as we are leveraging it here today. So let me close my remarks by just saying that space developments are very, very exciting, obviously, both in terms of exploration and in terms of commerce, improving our lives here on Earth. I am certain that as we experienced during the Apollo era, in addition to the direct benefits we're going to get from space and space commerce, that we're going to see benefits in secondary and tertiary ways that we cannot even imagine. And I think about areas like space medicine and manufacturing and other areas that will really change our lives on Earth in fundamentally different ways. So I very much thank you for inviting me to be here with you today, and hope we continue to have a wonderful workshop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. O'Connell. It's a pleasure listening to you and hearing all about the wonderful space commercial activities that are taking place and how you've personally been involved in many of those. Our next presenter is actually going to be a video presentation by the chairwoman of Space Foundation, Dr. Catherine Thornton. Dr. Thornton has served on the Space Foundation Board of Directors since 2010 in various capacities and was elected chairwoman in 2020. Dr. Thornton is a former NASA astronaut and current professor emeritus at the University of Virginia in the School of Engineering and Applied Science, Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. She was selected by NASA in May 1984 and is a veteran of 4 space flights, STS-33 in 1989, STS-49 in 1992, STS-61 in 1993, and STS-73 in 1995. She has logged over 975 hours in space, including more than 21 hours of extravehicular activity, and she was inducted into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame in 2010. So without any further ado, I would like to invite our audience to watch the message from Dr. Thornton.
Thank you for allowing me to join you today. I hope there will be future opportunities to meet many of you in person, either at the upcoming Space Symposium in August or in future travels that we might share to one another's countries. As you may have heard, I've had the extraordinary privilege of being an astronaut and seeing the world as few people are able to do so. Growing up and going to school, we all learn about geography of the world, often one country or one continent at a time. But when you're on a space flight and have the chance to look out the window, you really get to appreciate how we are all interconnected. Continents, all of which have their distinctive colors and geographical features, are not subdivided by political borders. There's certainly diversity in the colors of water and land and light that you see. It all has a flow to it. But one thing that is very obvious is how all of those distinctions and differences come together into one spot in the universe that we all share and call home. It's a powerful sight, and one that I'm grateful more people will get to see for themselves in the coming years with more and more launch opportunities becoming available. It's life-changing, but also affirming of the potential we all have to work together and be the difference here on Earth. As my friend and fellow Space Foundation colleague Tom Zelibor shared with you in his remarks, at the Space Foundation, we see today's space activities as a global space ecosystem, a collection of integrated systems and stakeholders. While humanity has always looked up to the stars with wonder, at no other point in our history have we had more people and more countries participating in space than we do today. With more than 80 countries operating in space and hundreds, if not thousands, of companies and entities now finding their place in space, the possibilities are endless of what we might do. As I've learned in my spaceflight career, as well as a professor at the University of Virginia, success in any venture is not a solo performance. It's a team effort. Let me illustrate that for you based upon 3 points that Tom Zelibor mentioned to you earlier today. Those are information, education, and collaboration. While those points may serve as mission objectives for the Space Foundation, they are also the same points that contribute to successful space flights and space operations. I visualize those objectives as stone pillars of a foundation upon which successful space operations are built, but I also see vines on those pillars that are continuously intertwined. As I think back on my career, information, education, and collaboration are fundamental elements, along with a bit of luck, that took me to space. Here's how. Many people think a space mission begins with a launch, but in reality, before anything lifts off, you need a lot of information to come together to make the most informed decisions you possibly can. As a professor, I encountered young people who had a very clear idea of where they were going and what they wanted to do with their lives. Any bit of information or a class that didn't seem to fit into their plan was extraneous and consequently unnecessary. Theirs was a very linear plan. I learned over the course of my career that life is anything but linear, and every bit of information I possess is a tool in my toolbox that may be useful in the future. In fact, I would describe the years prior to my first spaceflight in 1989 as an information phase, a time of collecting all kinds of knowledge and information that enabled me to become an astronaut and subsequently be assigned to fly in space. As my crew and I trained for my first space shuttle flight, we spent hours in simulators training for nominal procedures, what we planned to do in space, and even more time training for malfunctions, events that we hoped would never happen. We trained to operate every science payload on board and how to successfully deploy satellites in the cargo bay. Even though we were not principal scientists of the experiments or operators of the satellite, it was very important that we understood the science objectives and satellite systems so that we could recognize and recover when things didn't go according to plan. There's an adage that there are 2 ways to mess up in space. One is to not follow the checklist, and the other is to follow the checklist explicitly without understanding the consequences of every action. Now let's move on to education. On my second flight to space, I got to do something even more unique, a spacewalk. Long before you ever put on a spacesuit and step outside of a spacecraft, education becomes a full-time exercise. It certainly requires a lot of information, which you get from those who have had previous experiences, but education also comes from all the instructors you encounter along the way. Part of my spacewalk education took place in one of the largest pools in the world. It's called the Weightless Environment Training Facility, or in NASA lingo, the WETF. Floating in a water tank is one of the environments that we use to simulate working in a bulky spacesuit in a weightless environment. Weights are attached to our air-filled spacesuits to create neutral buoyancy, where we neither rise to the top nor sink to the bottom. It's not a perfect simulation of working in space because we still have the drag of the water, which makes it more difficult to move, but easier to stay in place, which becomes surprisingly more difficult in the space environment. As we're going through our tasks, trainers coach us in the procedures, what to expect, and how what we are experiencing differs from what we will experience in space. Those trainers, who are often years younger than their trainees, have never done a spacewalk or ever even been in space. Based on information carefully gleaned from previous space flights and lengthy debriefs, they coach and guide astronauts on how to work in space. More importantly, their collective information from previous missions, mental and physical data banks of what worked well and what went wrong, is crucial to developing a good plan for the next mission. Their contribution is the ability to convey information at a time and in a manner that can most effectively contribute to mission success. The experiences I gained from the WEDF in my first spacewalk were really put to the test during the Hubble mission in 1993. This was the Hubble rescue mission where we had to fix an instrument the size of a bus going at 17,500 miles per hour. Plans for this mission date way back to the early days of Hubble design, years before I became an astronaut. As one of the 4 great observatories proposed in 1979 to look at the universe from space in 4 different wavelengths, the Hubble Space Telescope was the first of the great observatories launched in 1990 and one of 2 still in operation today, thanks to 5 visits from astronauts to repair, replace, and refurbish the spacecraft and instruments. We had 5 planned spacewalks on the first visit to accomplish all the tasks on Hubble, including replacing the solar rays. The nominal procedure was to command the solar rays to retract in a manner similar to a window shade so that we could stow them in the cargo bay for return to Earth. One array failed to retract. This was a malfunction that had been anticipated as a possibility, so our training and knowledge were put to use. The only unexpected aspect of the event was the breathtaking beauty of the solar ray floating away from us over the backdrop of the deserts and the Red Sea. I had the best view in the universe and one that I will never forget. Finally, let's talk about collaboration. Collaboration is vital in every aspect of spaceflight, but perhaps it is appreciated most intensely at landing. Each of the crews who visited and worked on Hubble are given enormous credit for keeping that extraordinary instrument in operation. But in truth, the mantle of success goes to everyone, from those who conceived of, designed, built, and operated the spacecraft, to those who designed and built the instruments, to everyone who made our space shuttle mission safe and successful. I remember on landing days feeling an intense need to thank everyone who was part of the great collaboration. It's easy for us to look at any landing as the end of a journey. When the space shuttle parked at the end of the runway that landed on, it certainly brought an end to my missions, and in reality, those landings were the beginning of a lot more activities that we could not imagine at that time. Truthfully, all the science, astronomy, and engineering that occurred on my 4 missions took on new missions when the shuttle wheels stopped. Fixing Hubble like we did allowed 3 decades of new astronomy to occur, and as a result, literally enabled us to rewrite every one of the world's textbooks on what we know about astronomy and our surroundings. One of the science payloads I worked on during my last spaceflight has spun off a commercial technology that purifies airs in hospitals, schools, and homes around the world. And that was not even one of their objectives for that experiment. While successful landings certainly require information and education, they also require significant collaboration because everything that has to come together and work together. This is why collaboration is the beginning point for possibilities. I'm sure that is something that UAE is experiencing with Hope Orbiter as it circles Mars. That orbit insertion, while it was an achieved milestone, is also the beginning of a lot of research and opportunities for those scientists and students to explore next. It is also the source of inspiration for what that country and others might do next. Landing is certainly bittersweet, and it's great to be home safely with family and friends, but it marks the end of an amazing adventure. In a day or two, about the same time it takes our bodies to readapt to Earth's gravity, we are hopefully back in the rotation for another flight, and 100% engaged with supporting another project or another crew's mission. If I had to boil down all of the launch, spacewalk, and landing stories that I've shared with you to illustrate the mission points of information, education, and collaboration, it comes down to one word: teamwork. None of those things would have happened without a whole ensemble of talent, all coming together to do their parts to make launches, spacewalks, and landings possible. Many people, when they see or meet an astronaut, can find themselves a bit starstruck. That's certainly flattering, but when you see or meet an astronaut, or a flight engineer, or a satellite operator, in truth, you are meeting a single representative of a great team of talent that makes what any of these positions do possible. When you consider your future in space, you need to ask yourself two questions. Who are the people that I can work with to make this mission a reality? And what other talents and skills do I need to bring to the table that will take this aspiration and turn it into a shared achievement? While it's appropriate to celebrate individual achievements, Neil Armstrong and the crew of Apollo 11 always made sure audiences knew that they did not get to the moon by themselves. It was millions of other people behind them that made their launch, moonwalk, and landings possible. I've benefited from that same formula on my 4 space flights, but also in a career in a university classroom and elsewhere in life. Teamwork is a phenomenal dividend to have from space activities and investments, especially because you don't know where those relationships might take you. And today, you have no shortage of countries, companies, and citizens who want to be part of those teams. So as you consider the roles you and the ICESCO community want to play in space, it is the teamwork and relationships you forge that will take you places you cannot begin to imagine. That has a lot of hope and promise that everyone can share. Thank you for allowing me to join you today. I hope you will join us at the symposium this coming August and in future years. There's a lot we at the Space Foundation can do with you to make that future happen, and we look forward to exploring those possibilities with you in the days to come. Again, thank you, and have a great rest of your program.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Thornton for her amazing and inspiring comments that it really takes a team, and we're all on the same team together. And again, the Space Foundation is honored to be a partner here with ICESCO. That brings us to Frank Salzgerber. I want to welcome Frank. He is overseeing the largest space entrepreneurship network in the world. His team has initiated over 360 industry transfers, supported nearly 1,000 startups. He supports the exploitation of the ESA patent portfolios and promotes the ESA business applications offer of ESA, which have supported additionally over 600 business cases. In the next 3 years, ESA Space Solutions will invest 220 million euros in seed funding. Prior to this post, he was the head of the technology transfer and business incubation and head of the commercial development in the European Astronaut Department of the Directorate of Human Spaceflight, Microgravity, and Exploration at the European Space Agency. I know, Frank, that we've had a number of questions in the chat talking about incubators and seed funding and space commerce, and you've had a lot of lead-in panelists like Kevin O'Connell, former director of the Department of Commerce Space Commerce Program and Entrepreneurial Program. So, Frank, I want to turn this over to you. I know we have a lot of excited audience participants that wants to hear about how they can be the next Elon Musk.
Shelley, thank you so much. Salam alaikum to our friends everywhere where you listen to us, and good afternoon. Yeah, I think it's more opportunities. At the moment, we could clone ourselves because space is more than active and interesting as everybody before, or every time before. And the numbers you mentioned are already old, because we reach already 1,200 companies which we had supported as startups. Why am I telling that? Because I'm not a space background person. I'm an industrial engineer. I worked for Apple. I had my own startup company, and ESA hired me in to help with commercial stuff. And the only thing I can do, and I'm sorry for that, because we have so great leaders here today, scientists, astronauts, I can only do business. I cannot do more. I can do business and commercial, and that's it. And was when I started doing commercialization, tech transfer, and working with startups 16 years ago. Not so easy. Now everything is moving well. We started with one incubation center in the Netherlands and said, And the Irish have a very nice saying, on the shoulders of the giants, you see further. And we said, let's be the giant for these young startup companies and help them. We started with one incubation center. We have now 22 in 66 locations. We work with our colleagues in Saudi Arabia, where we're in a dialogue, and they have a great place and they have a great setup. We work with Singapore, we work with our NASA colleagues, we work with Roscosmos and SCOCOA, because we believe it's the cooperation which makes the change. And I think therefore we're so grateful also to be here today. And one of my colleagues, Elia Montanari, will speak a lot later a little bit also about finance and so on. So I think the goal, and this I want to summarize a little bit, what I can bring you and share with the lessons learned over the last 16 years is cooperation. And the good thing is I'm 51, so I learned to cooperate only with the people which love to work with me. You cannot convince the hunting dog to run into the forest. You know, either the wrong dog really runs with you into the forest when you go hunting, or you leave better the dog at home. And and supporting the startups, there's another saying. I'm sitting here at the moment in the mountains near Bavaria in Austria. When you go fishing, you have to take care that the worm is tasty for the fish, not for the fisher. So we have to see what is really the help part of the startups, where we really can be the godfather and the godmother or the good uncle or the good aunt, helping the startups to grow. The third thing which we learned, it takes time. I have two boys, Lucas and Johannes. They are 14 years old. And when we had the new house, a new garden, I said, which tree you want to have? Because we have to build some trees by legislation. Say, we want to have a walnut tree. And for all the gardeners, walnuts, trees have to be not too shady, not too much sun, but it takes 15 years until you can harvest. My sons are my son. That means patient, or be patient is not in our genes, not at all. And this is the same with innovation and startups. It takes a decade. So we're running since 16 years now, the business incubation. And in the beginning, it was hard. Last year, we had 700 million invested in the startups were coming out of our pipeline. And that's not so bad. And we have the first startup companies which going now to Spark and going into $1 billion evaluation. So it takes time. And that's important for governments, because some of our politicians, they're re-elected after 4 years, though they think in 4 years. So some people think in quarters, but we as agencies, we have to think in a decade. And normally that's something which we in space we can do. Then we learned, think local. There are no better specialists than in the local market. So we work with CNES, we work with DLR. In Switzerland, our partner is the University of Zurich, the ETH Zurich, because they're pretty good. So, and we add what they cannot do, the internationalization. Startups in space have something in common. They have to survive in a harsh environment. And this we know very well as agencies. So this, I think, we have to bring together. Another thing is support the funnel. From the idea, it's like raising kids. When you get a newborn baby, it's not ready for university. So our job is to bring them from birth to crash, to school, to university. And if we do all right, we're happy, we get a Hanukkah, Christmas card, New Year's card, or Ramadan card. So then we know that the kids come back and they have grown. So learn not giving them fish, learn them fishing. So, and putting that into a nutshell, we have certain, similar to the space, not similar than the Space Foundation, because I think you're doing an amazing job. What we can offer is to share lessons learned, what we have done wrong, where we burned our fingers. Because some of you might be engineers. I'm an industrial engineer, and my old director general, Jacques Dodard, once told me, as an engineer in the mechanics, you learned if you do something new, you have friction. And if you have no friction, you do something wrong. And my answer was that time to him, then we do something terrible right, because we have a lot of friction. So a lot of member states investing now in the business application into startups. There's a show which after this session will be run where we've grouped all the startups in Germany together. And we have great cases. Only in Bavaria, we have 3 companies in south of Germany building rockets. And some of them raised over 100 million already. So it's great what the US is doing, but I think there's much potential in the rest of the world, not only in Europe, but the rest of the world, but it's built, as I said, on a cooperation. And tomorrow I have the chance to speak with some colleagues in the EU-Africa Forum about the same subject. So my helping hand, which I want to give, and it's not only us, we are happy to share connections to show you how other governments are doing, how tech transfer could work. There is a meeting called SATO, Space Technology Transfer Organizations, which is NASA, JAXA, Roscosmos, once was hosted already by the Space Foundation. We have business incubation centers, which are happy to share and international collaborate. Because there's a nice saying, young and inefficient artists imitate, experienced artists copy. So let's be the experienced artists and share. And the good thing is, I know that startups to startups, they make a very fair deal. So I'm a little bit done by that, and I want to share the last story, why we as ESA work so much with startups and why we believe that. It's about 2 kilometers from here. I'm sitting in the mountains on 1,000 meter altitude, where normally you have a long winter here. And there was a mountain where one of my boys, Johannes, was going the first time the red slope. And for the people not being the skiers, you have blue scopes, which is the starters. Red is already advanced. The black ones is when you want to kill yourself. So he was 6 years old, going the first time the red slopes, falling down, standing up, falling down, standing up, falling down, standing up. At the end of the day, I have a picture. And Sarah, maybe you remember this picture. You see him smiling after the end of the day because he has no fear and little respect. This is why we, as the Giants, should work with the startups, because they can risk something. They are like the kids, and they have not lost the curiosity, maybe like we did. So I close here. I'm happy to give the helping hand to all our friends and see where we can develop also and contribute to their ecosystem. I've shared my LinkedIn. I know I'm between the break, which I do not want. And maybe you'll see you all in the Astronautic Congress in October, and then we can go into deeper details. Thank you so very much. Shukran, and giving back to Shelley.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Sleesgeber. That was a wonderful presentation. And again, it highlights the diversity that's part of the space ecosystem. You know, we think military, but commercial, civil, international, and how do we help bring that technology from ESA and NASA and others? How do we bring that to the forefront? How do we help those young entrepreneurs? And so that was some great lessons learned and some great stories. And as you're enjoying your mountain view, I have a beautiful mountain view of the Rocky Mountains. So thank you so much.